me start by thanking you for being here this morning. As you can see, we've given everybody a packet, and the reason we're here and what we want to talk about is this unfair labor practice that we are having filed against our sheriff, and we don't take this lightly. We recently, as you know, went through the same issue with our past mayor, John Payton, where he directly tried to talk to our members and try to get them to see his point of view. That's not his job. That's undercutting what the union does and what they do for their members and negotiate. Our sheriff has taken it a step further. At least with the mayors, the mayor went to a location, there was 2 officers there, and he sat down and talked to them. In this case, our sheriff has called roll calls together where the officers have to show up to these locations, and at that point told them that they either take this 2% pay cut, or there would be layoff of their fellow officers and maybe consequences that would be much worse. We can't have somebody such as the sheriff, that's the employer of these officers, a representative of the city of Jacksonville, to undermine what we're trying to do and work through this process as it's stated in the law with the administration and going through the impasse process to undermine what we're attempting to do. It's against the law, it's a Florida state statute, and that's why we have filed this unfair labor practice against Sheriff Rutherford and the city of Jacksonville.
When did he start doing this?
Yes.
When did he start doing this?
Well, first it started last week in the media. You heard some of it in the media. You saw it at the city council finance committee meeting, where he stated, well, not the committee meeting, but the city council meeting on the 13th, where he stated that he was going to start working at that 2%. And then yesterday, which was the 15th, he had roll calls all day, throughout the day, meeting with the officers and telling them this. And I heard about it through the officers. My phone started ringing at 6 o'clock in the morning, and all it's done is upset the officers even more. You know, now it's going to make it even harder for me to get a deal done, because they're even more upset that the sheriff would threaten them the way he did in reference to this 2%. But you have to understand, when we started this process, what we've always said was that if the city can show us where there's a gap in the budget and they need these dollars, we're willing to do our part. But we're negotiating with the 09-10 fiscal year. Nobody took a pay cut. Nobody lost any benefits. The city ended up with a surplus in that year. And then when you see what they did at the finance committee, and this is what these officers are seeing and reading, where once the committee got a hold of $4.4 million from the sheriff's office, they took $2.2 million of those dollars and said, we're going to use it to repave roads. They didn't say we're going to put it back in the sheriff's office budget to keep officers and keep this community safe. They wanted to use it for another pet project of theirs. So that's why it makes it so hard to be able to get these officers to agree to make any type of concessions when they see what the city's doing with these dollars. They're not putting it back into the community to keep the community safe. And, you know, people talk about this is Nelson Cuba that's making this decision. No, on January 12, 2011, you'll see it in the press release, these members voted. And overwhelmingly, they said no to the 2% pay cut. And there's a reason for that. It's because all the wasteful spending they continue to see. And then if they were to make that concession, they saw what the council finance committee did 2 weeks ago. That's a serious concern.
I know in a way it answers this next question, but a lot of people will say, hey, everybody else took a 2% cut. Police should do the same.
That is not true. The fact is this. JTA never took a 2% pay cut. JEA never took a 2% pay cut. As a matter of fact, they have negotiated a pay raise for the upcoming year. The CWA, the members of CWA never took a 2% pay cut. But what I also say to those individuals is, our jobs and our duties and responsibilities to the citizens of this community are different than those other employees. And those organizations negotiated that for their employees. It's my job to negotiate what my members are asking me to do. And right now, based on the sacrifices and the things we do and what our members are seeing, it's tough to get them to come around and accept that pay cut when they know that that council, or at least that finance committee, rather use the dollars in whatever projects they want to put them towards instead of keeping this community safe, or the citizens of this community safe.
But do you worry by not taking the pay cut, you could potentially face more layoffs?
Well, it's not my decision. As the sheriff has said plenty of times, I don't run the sheriff's office. Now, if the sheriff wanted to sit down with me and we could go line by line and look at his budget, I can assure you that I could find places to make cuts before I would lay officers off and jeopardize the safety of this community.
What's your biggest concern right now?
Well, my biggest concern right now is moving forward, is making sure that the council, first of all, hopefully amends the budget on September 27th and puts those dollars back so there are no layoffs and we make sure we keep this community safe. And if there's issues that they have with the sheriff's office and his budget, then let's look at that going forward into the next year to make sure, you know, nobody has an itemized budget of the sheriff's office budget. Right? Nobody can determine where that's at. Well, let's start there. And then they could start looking through that and making suggestions, because they can't tell the sheriff how to run his department or where to make cuts. But they sure can make suggestions where they think maybe there's waste. As we say, there's waste in city government and the way they spend dollars. Well, I think what's happened is that a lot of these city council members, as I personally talk to them, believe there's a lot of waste on the sheriff's office side, and they want him to start getting rid of some of that waste. And that, you know, that starts from the top going to the bottom.
Have you confronted the sheriff before this legal action was filed, or have you spoken with him since?
Yes, I did. I spoke to him yesterday and told him what he was doing. He was committing an unfair labor practice.
And what did he say?
He said I was wrong, and I said he was wrong, and we left it at that.
What will happen with this? I mean, what are you hoping that this will accomplish? Either to get him to be quiet, and then I know you've dropped the similar practice you filed with the city. You dropped that before. Is that what you think could end up happening here, or what?
I mean, that could happen if he stops going out there and telling these officers that this is what they need to do. And basically, you know, part of it is intimidation. I mean, this is your sheriff. This is not, you know, the mayor. Or this is your employer, the guy you work for. You know, we're not Dixie County or some little county in the state of Florida where the officers have no rights. This is a different department and a different type of contract negotiations that take place, and different rules that we fall under that they don't in the sheriff's office, where these officers have no rights. We do have rights here. And the sheriff has to understand that he also has to follow the rules. He expects our officers to follow dozens and hundreds of rules that we have over there at the sheriff's office. Then he has to also fall under the rules that are set by the state of Florida, and he has to understand that.
But what could happen? I mean, if the labor board goes, okay, do they just say stop it, or what?
Well, they would, you know, they would admonish him for what he's done. They would have to pay us for our legal fees, for the cost of those legal fees. Those are the things that could happen.
How is this going to affect, I know with the 4.4 that was added, it was something like 20.9 million facing in cuts, which could be about 200 jobs. How is this going to play into that?
Well, I think, you know, the other issue you have to look at, and I'm trying to also get this across to the council members, if you don't put those dollars back in, then we will also file an unfair labor practice against the council, because you cannot be negotiating. You're not negotiating in good faith if you already cut the money out before you have any concessions. That's always an issue. That's why if you go back and look over the past couple of years, the money has always been kept there. And if you got the concessions, then they could, you know, the sheriff office gives the money back to the city, as he's doing this year. You know, they put $7-point-something million in the contingency fund for him. The sheriff is only requesting $4.2 2 million of that, so the other $2+ million is just going back into the general fund. It's the same thing here. The city has to place that money there by law. If not, we will file an unfair labor practice against the city also on this issue.
That's if that 4.4 is not. put
If
back.
those dollars are not put there, at least in a contingency fund for use in case this never comes about, whatever they're negotiating.
Did you hear whether or not today the roll call issue was still happening with the sheriff?
There were no roll calls today.
None today.
Not that I'm aware of, at least not in patrol. I don't know if he met with corrections and said anything.
And what is the process? You filed this, do you have a hearing already set, or do you have to wait for something?
It's been
to
filed.
say?
They will contact us,
Okay.
advise us if there's cause for the hearing. Once that is set, then we will have a hearing officer will set up a date, and we move along from there.
How many officers do you get in touch with at these roll calls?
Well, you're talking about 6 different roll calls, somewhere in the vicinity of probably about 500-600 officers. So, I mean, and it's not voluntary. You know, you're mandated to be there and listen to whatever the sheriff is saying. And it's not like they had the option to even ask any questions, because several of them did want to ask questions and they weren't given that opportunity. You know, the most disturbing issue to me is 6 months ago at roll calls before these same officers, he told them that they didn't deserve to take a pay cut, that the millage rate was low enough, that their pay was lower than anybody else in the state. When we talk about communities our size, that we spent less on public safety than communities our size. Well, what's changed between 6 months ago and today? In my opinion, nothing. Now you hear the sheriff say, well, you have 1 of every 10 people you meet is unemployed. Well, you know what? 6 months ago, unemployment was at about 12%. Today, unemployment is a little less than 10%. So, if anything, unemployed individuals have become better. And I guess the process for him to help us through this is he's going to lay off even more people and put them out there and make this community more unsafe as we move forward.
What would you say is an area where you know things could be cut,
Well,
trimmed back?
I tell you, one of the things we're looking at is trying to get a breakdown of the sheriff's office budget. The city doesn't have it. The general counsel's, the council auditor's office doesn't have it. Well, we're going to get a copy of that. I can tell you right off the top of my head, when I think about it, let's look at the IT department. You know, you're going to hear about that a lot. You look at the state attorney's office, you look at the public defender's office. They keep a lot of confidential information also, and they use the city's IT department. What would be different about us? If we want to be lean, we talk about being lean and saving dollars, let's stop duplicating services. That's one area that we may need to look at going forward into the future and save dollars, because that will save dollars in the whole city budget. And at the same time, look at the HR department. It's necessary for us to have our own HR department. So those are just 2 things that I know of duplicating services that if you look at other constitutional officers, don't have. So that's right off the top of my head without having an itemized budget of the sheriff's office.
Have you talked to the mayor at all?
I saw the mayor yesterday at an event, so I talked to him. So we are in constant dialogue with the new administration in trying to come to some equitable solution to both parties to this issue. But, you know, the sheriff doing what he's doing does not help this process. And you know, the mayor, you know, he can't control the sheriff. So, I mean, he can't tell the sheriff, stay out of this. The sheriff should know better. I mean, he just saw what happened with Peyton when he directly contacted our members. He should know better than to do what he did.
You said you're going to be getting a hold of the itemized budget. Are you going to be sharing that with anyone, or is it just going to be FOP that's going to be
Well,
looking at it?
I have to assume that's public record. If you guys, I don't know if nobody's ever asked the sheriff for it, or if he says it's some top secret paperwork that nobody can get, because, you know, I don't. So this will be the first time we asked for it. I was just surprised that nobody at the mayor's office or at the council auditor's office had ever seen one. That made no sense to me. But, you know, being in the situation we're in now, and I think this is something that we're gonna have to look at. Good?
Nelson,
Yes.
end of last month, the sheriff was talking to the council finance committee. He was talking about layoffs. He was trying to satisfy them about this $4.4 million. And said, I have a specific list of positions I'm gonna cut. The cuts will start October 1st. Because that's coming up quickly, I'm gonna be notifying individual officers who will be laid off so they can prepare themselves. To your knowledge, have officers been getting notices that, hey, you're on our list for losing your job starting next month?
My understanding is that they have put the letters together from sources that I have, and that those letters are going to be mailed out soon.
And the complaint, I was looking at that, it's dated yesterday, since signed and it's dated yesterday. So was that physically handed in to PERC yesterday? Was it like FedExed or, I just want to make sure I characterize.
We send it electronically, and then we mail it by mail also, so it's already been, PERC already has it. And the city already has it, their general counsel has it in the city also.
Just a little bit of clarification, and that 4 million, are you having them wanting to put the 2 million back in, or the whole 4 million back in?
Well, the whole 4.4 million needs to be put back in.
But that, and that's, if they don't do the 4.4, then you would file the unfair labor.
Correct.
Okay, so.
Because 2.2 is under the line, and another 2.2 went to pay-go for,
Maybe, you know, I don't think they know what they did. So, hopefully at Tuesday's meeting, there'll be more explanation of exactly who did what. You know, I sat through when they made those votes, when they took those votes. My understanding at that time, I thought they took it, but when I spoke to Cindy Lacadera and the sheriff, they said, no, that's not what happened. Well, a week later, sure enough, that is what happened. So.
What is the reaction been from city council people that you've talked to in reference to this issue?
Well, I mean, some of the council members I've talked to are, you know, there's several of them that are willing to put some amendment in to put those dollars back. But several of them are pretty upset with the sheriff of the way he's handled this. And that's a concern to them. But based on the fact that they understand that we need to keep this community safe, and it's about the citizens, not some little pissing match between the sheriff and them. This is something that can be addressed in the next budget year, because we don't have time to address a lot of these issues now. So in that next budget year coming up, you know, a lot of these issues can be addressed, but we need to fix it now to make sure that the citizens are safe during the next fiscal year as we move along.
Will you be at Finance Tuesday to explain the potential legal ramifications if they don't put that money back in?
Yes, but I've also contacted several of these council members to let them know what those ramifications
Which
could
will be there in person Tuesday?
Yes.
You said some of those letters are being prepared. How many are? Do you know?
I think I was told 50-something letters right now.
50-something. Could we potentially see if all these cuts go through, the 200 figure that has been thrown out there?
You know, there's several vacancies within the department that they've kept open. So through those vacancies, then some folks wouldn't be laid off. I have no idea. Remember, some of these are civilian positions and some are law enforcement. I don't know, you know, what number he's looking at are going to be, you know, boots on the streets, as we say, compared to more on the civilian side. Or non-essential personnel is what I would call it. Okay? Thank you again.